Welcome to another episode of Fast Talk. Today, we have someone special joining Trevor and I in the studio, Rach McBride. While it's common for road and mountain bikers to transition to gravel, Rach is a bit of an outlier because they're competing at the highest level in both long course triathlon as well as off-road gravel and mountain bike events. In fact, we're talking with Rach after their win at the Boulder Ironman 70.3 and a few days before they leave for the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Rach and their coach Mateo Mercur about how to prepare for disciplines that are seemingly on different ends of the spectrum and giving practical advice for you to make the leap as well. So, put on your TT helmet, air up your knobby tires, and let's make you fast. Listeners, are you reviewing your post-race data or doing at-home lactate tests? It's crucial to understand how to test, what the numbers mean, and how to change your training based on your data. We know that sifting through your performance data can feel daunting. Good news, we have over 30 years of coaching and data analysis experience. You go race, leave the analysis to us. Book your data analysis session today at fasttalklabs.com/solutions. Rach, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Real pleasure having you on the show.
You know, so the big thing today is that we're talking about how disparate you're competing, but I think we have to start with this weekend in Boulder, outside our studio, super hot day. You won.
I know.
How did that happen?
I don't even know. What an incredible experience. You know, I just jumped into Boulder 70.3 as it's like, oh, I have a free weekend, you know, in between the Leadville stage race and Leadville 100. So I'm here in Boulder. Why not jump in and do it? And wow, I'm so glad that I did.
I hope I can get to the level where it's like, you know, I think I'm just going to do a 70.3 this weekend and win it, you know?
Not just finish, yeah. Let's just go win it. Got nothing better to do.
And I asked, how did that happen? But I mean, I think it's pretty obvious how it happened. You destroyed everybody on the bike. Yeah,
that bike was incredible. I mean, to be at this point in my life and my career and to have done the fastest 70.3 bike of my life was an incredible experience. I mean, I had a plan for the race, and a lot of it was just to go and really nail that bike. And, you know, my coach Mateo was on the sidelines giving me splits and letting me know that I was gaining on everyone. And so that was a really big motivator to just keep pushing. And as soon as I could see folks, you know, in my radar, so saw Lauren and then I saw Holly, I just kept moving and got into the lead and just, kept going for it.
Nice. A lot of people had trouble with the heat. Obviously, it was really hot, as the Boulder race can often be. Did you do anything special? Was the heat affecting you? Did it affect you less? How did you kind of survive, so to say?
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that. Usually I am pretty terrible racing in the heat. It's something that's really affected me in the past. I, though, have been in Utah, Boulder area for quite a few weeks and have had some hot racing experience already this year, racing in Kansas at Unbound. I guess I have acclimated a little bit, and I was doing really well at keeping myself cool out there too, just dousing myself with water, keeping ice on me, and just felt I wasn't really overheating at any point, and just very focused.
Yeah. Awesome.
So something that was a little unique for you was you were coming down from really high altitude to this, where I think a lot of the competitors were coming up from sea level. How do you think that factored in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just up in Leadville racing stage race I think I was up there for 4 or 5 days or so. And I, even coming to Boulder, I have felt like the altitude doesn't really affect me all of that much, which has been really surprising. And so I think that's also knowing the confidence that I can race at 10 to 12,000 feet and I am totally fine, allowed me in Boulder to not really think about that, to not really think it was going to be a problem. And I knew that, I've heard, even though if you're acclimated to the elevation, it's still challenging to race at this altitude. But yeah, I think I didn't have it in my head. I didn't really think it was going to be a thing.
Well, Rach, I know that we just met 10 minutes ago, but you're already kind of my new favorite triathlete. My old favorite triathlete was Cameron Dye. And that's mostly because Cam was a good person, but he also crushed people on the bike. So now that he's retired and you're the new bike crusher, then you're my favorite de facto triathlete. You're also my new favorite triathlete because you're really pushing boundaries in the sport of triathlon, right? So first, by kind of this non-traditional thing that we're talking about, you just did Leadville stage race, you did a 70.3, you're going back to Leadville, it's a crazy schedule, you're doing some really fun events that I would love to do, maybe not the triathlon, but we're going to get into that stuff later. Something I want to touch on now is that you're one of the first athletes to compete in a non-binary gender division. And as the first non-binary athlete on our show, I'd love to hear, in your words, exactly what that means. What's happening in the sport right now, kind of bringing in more of this inclusivity and allowing opportunity for people to kind of express and be who they are.
Yeah. So being non-binary just means that I identify outside of the binary. So I don't identify as a man or a woman, but as non-binary. And yeah, we are seeing, non-binary folks and non-binary athletes have always been in the world throughout the history of humankind. It's just now that, and especially in the world of sport, we're creating a space for folks to compete outside of the binary. Sport has been such a binary avenue that now creating a space for non-binary folks and gender diverse folks to compete in a category that aligns with their gender identity is really powerful. What we are seeing now, especially in the world of gravel, is that all of the major gravel races have non-binary categories now. And we are seeing an explosion of non-binary folks finally coming out and having the courage to be able to compete and having a space. Like they may have been competing in the binary, but now they have a space to compete in their own category. And so, for example, at Unbound, last year we saw one non-binary competitor finishing the 100, Abby Robbins. And this year we had 17 in the whole race. So it's like you create the space and non-binary folks are going to come out and show up. And this year as well, just happening in the same weekend, last weekend, USAT National Amateur Championships had a non-binary category for the first time. So it's really changing in the world of triathlon as well. It's a lot more slowly in triathlon, but gravel is really, I think, showing the way.
Gravel is certainly on the more innovative side of things, and I think it attracts a more diverse just type of person where you have a lot of people interacting with gravel in different ways, from racing to partying to having fun. So there's that aspect of gravel, and it makes sense to me that it's going to be the discipline that is a bit more open and inclusive of doing things in a different way. But I'm happy that we are seeing this in triathlon. I hope that we continue to see it across other sports. And, I think any progress is good progress at this point in time. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah, I think with gravel, it's a newer sport, and so it's really started from a grassroots level, and so organizers have been able to create their own thing. There hasn't been this template of how it's done, and the community just seems to be a very diverse and open and accepting community.
That's fantastic. Just wanted to ask you a question about that and how you feel about that, having that third division, the non-binary division within sports.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so my first race as in a non-binary category was Big Sugar Gravel last year. And it was a really profound experience for me to finally just feel like I had a comfortable place in sport. I describe, in my career as a triathlete, showing up at start lines and just feeling, before I kind of understood my own identity, feeling out of place and feeling like I didn't fit in and feeling like the, gendered terms weren't really landing with me and that I was a bit of an imposter. And so when I finally understood who I actually am and how I identify, and then being able to have that experience to race in a category that validates and affirms my gender identity, it was really powerful and inspired me then to continue in racing. I was accepted into the Lifetime Grand Prix, and in all of the Lifetime races, I'm able to race in the non-binary category. And especially at Unbound, being on that podium with a full podium of fellow non-binary athletes, it was really the proudest podium that I have been on in my 11-year career.
That's great to hear. Part of the reason I asked this is I was reading some position statements by the IOC last night, and as you know, part of their charter is to be inclusive of everybody. And they have said this is a really, to make sure they're fully inclusive is actually a really big challenge. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to be the direction they were heading in, is we need this third division. We need this non-binary division.
Yeah. And it's neat to see there are a lot of organizations, national and international, who are coming out with different policies. And it really is, I think that we're going to see non-binary inclusion more happening at the amateur level first before we see it in a more professional division. And I think that's very reasonable. I think that we need to build up that population of non-binary athletes and then figure out how a non-binary professional category is going to work in different sports.
Yeah, so certainly steps are being taken, but a lot more work to be done.
Yeah.
There's some things to continue to, I don't want to say solve, but some things to continue to improve as we move forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope that work continues. You know, to the listeners out there, I think that this is a really interesting topic. And if anybody wants to reach out and continue this particular conversation, then check us out on the forums, or feel free to tweet at me at Robert Pickles. You know, we'd love to engage in more of this and maybe make it more of a topic kind of on the Fast Talk podcast moving forward. But beyond that, Rach, I'd love to kind of get back into the training side of things. What's your background in racing? Where did this all begin for you? And I'd love to talk through that and kind of bring us up to today and your motivation to switch into doing things like Lifetime Grand Prix and these off-road events, because I don't think that that's where you started.
No, I call myself an adult athlete. So I, dabbled in sports when I was a teenager, but quit everything when I was 15, and then decided I wanted to run a marathon when I was 25, and did my first triathlon at 28, and it totally took over my life.
Was it on a dare or a whim or anything like that?
No, I mean, when I got into running, it was more, I just was like, I felt really unhealthy. I felt like I wasn't doing anything that was exciting for me. And I was living in Ottawa, in the Canadian capital, and the winters there are terrible. It's like minus 40 Fahrenheit.
Been there, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just feeling really blah and wanted to do something epic. And I was like, oh, my parents ran a marathon in the mid 80s. Like, I'm sure I could do that too. So I just, started training and got into the community, running community. And then one of my running mentors just said, Rach, I think you could be an elite triathlete.
It makes you turn your head a little bit like, I could what?
Yeah. And I think at the time, like, I had a bit of a swimming background when I was a kid. So I knew how to swim freestyle. I had been a bike commuter throughout my 20s. And obviously I'd gotten into running and had a bit of a talent. My first marathon, I qualified for Boston, and then I ran Boston and just was really enjoying that. And I just took that idea and went with it. I was like, I'm going to be an elite triathlete. And so I moved out to the West Coast where the temperatures were more temperate and I could ride my bike outside all winter.
Where on the West Coast?
Vancouver, BC.
Okay.
Not what I was thinking. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm like Southern California is what I was expecting, but Vancouver works too. Beautiful place.
I lived out in Victoria for 5 years.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
So are you from Ottawa?
No. I grew up in the US and I finished high school in Germany, but my parents are Canadian. So I came to Canada for university and was in Ontario for about 10 years. And then I've been in Vancouver for over 15 years now.
So you moved to Vancouver, you kicked off your training.
Yeah. And I, first race I did was a little local sprint race, and I placed second overall, and I just had a blast at this race and loved it. And then just jumped right in. So my first Olympic distance race, it ended up being national amateur championships, which I won. And then the next year I was amateur world champion and got into more ITU draft legal racing. But I was then 29, 30 and was like, oh, it would really be really great to go to the Olympics, but people are retiring at this age. Right. So I raced bikes just for a couple of years because I burnt myself out in triathlon very quickly. And then when I got out of grad school, my coach at the time was like, I think you should try this half iron distance, and did my first race It was another local race with some, against some local pros, won it by 24 minutes, did a time that would have put me top 10 at the world champs that year. And I was like, I'm 32. I'm not getting any younger. I may as well just jump right in and see what I can do with this. And yeah, that was 2011. And I've been full-time pro ever since.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. I love hearing sort of the story and the journey and the finding your way to it, right? Because, that fork in the road could have gone somewhere totally different, right? And we wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to be sitting here talking with this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am, it is the world of sport, and what sport has brought to my life is incredible. It has changed my world. And it really, in one aspect, it's like I have found this thing that I am so passionate about, that like getting up every day and training and the process, I love every minute of it. I am so passionate about it. And, as I know I'm not going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. And so it's inspired me to not go into another career that I'm just going to be like, oh, I'm just like waiting for the weekend. Hope the weekend's coming soon or whatever, to find something that I am so passionate about, or take what I have learned from sport and put it into something that is really motivating for me. So it's inspired me to live life more.
Let's hear from Rach's coach, Mateo Mercur, about how he feels they've been able to maintain Rach's zest for the sport.
Mateo, it feels as though Rach has this real verve, spark, excitement for their training. Is that just who Rach is? Is that a product of training in this diverse manner? Have you seen that with other athletes? How does this wide-ranging discipline fit into really the mental and the happiness side of training?
Yeah, a happy athlete is an athlete that's going to want to get out and train, be motivated to train, and that's going to lead to success in racing. A big part of my work with athletes is relational. I want to have a really strong personal relationship with my athletes so that they feel seen and they feel understood and they feel supported. And I think Rach and I have that. I know that Rach and I have that. I spent the summer in 2016 in San Moritz with my coaching mentor, Brett Sutton. And he said something then that has stuck with me. So he said, I've never seen an athlete burnt out that wasn't winning. And, when an athlete is doing well, whether they're winning or just breaking personal records or still progressing and advancing, that tends to lead to them feeling good and happy and motivated. And Rach is doing that. This weekend at 70.3 Boulder, Rach had the fastest bike of the day, set their highest average speed ever in their racing career for a 70.3 course. And that's at the age of 44. And Rach may be the oldest athlete to win a 70.3 at this point now. Someone from Triathlon magazine is looking into that. Rach might have beat Dee Griesbauer out by about 90 days.
Okay.
That's the preliminary stats.
Yeah, we'll call it a win.
Anyway, but for me, harnessing an athlete's motivation, keeping an athlete focused is key. Running these training camps has been huge for Rach. It has kept Rach really focused, and it has allowed us to just enjoy working together. And I think that has also been a real contributor to their pleasure. And I got to say, this weekend's 70.3 was something that Rach proposed maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks before it. We sat down for a coffee and Rach said, "Hey coach, what do you think about Boulder 70.3? And I paused for a moment, gave it a moment's thought. And I said, yeah, let's go for it. And I told Rach that their plan would be to race the swim and the bike with total abandon, to leave nothing really for the run, and then to discover that they would be able to run after they exit T2. And Rach went out and did that. And I think that is also a part of what keeps an athlete like Rach motivated. When I said yes, and I said, and I want you to go off the chain and go for it, I think that was really exciting and motivating to Rach.
Is that passion, is that the reason that you jumped off into the dirt side of things? What motivated you to go in that direction?
Yeah, the dirt process was was a bit gradual. So I started training with some folks in BC who would go up to this town called Lillooet for training camps. And there's a lot of pavement, but there's some gravel as well. And so we would just on our road bikes, I was training with a bunch of roadies, would just put 28 millimeter gator skins and just ride the gravel as part of our riding, training rides. And then all of a sudden in 2013, some gravel races started popping up on the radar in the Pacific Northwest. And I went down to Oregon and did my first gravel race on a cyclocross bike. And I graduated from a road bike with 28s to a cyclocross bike.
Marginally bigger.
Yeah. And just loved it. It was, even through all of the triathlon stuff that I had been doing, it was the hardest thing that I had ever done. It was beautiful. You were out in these incredible Forest Service roads and amazing views, super hard climbs, which were my forte. And I just loved it. And so, I continued to try and dabble in gravel, mostly local races for a number of years. And then it wasn't until, the end of last year where I decided to finally try my hand at some of the majors. And it's been hard to these big gravel races that are coming up, it's hard to fit those in. Unbound is a 12-hour race. You can't just fit that in between Ironmans.
Well, based on the schedule you're keeping right now, it kind of sounds like you can, but maybe that's just you and it's not everyone else in the world.
So that really brings us to something I really want to ask you about, because we just recently did this episode with Ben Delaney where we were talking about the future of virtual racing and what impact that's going to have on road racing. And I think one of the biggest conclusions we drew out of that episode was that in the past, you really kind of had one discipline. You're a road cyclist, or you're a mountain biker, or you're a triathlete. And I think what we're seeing now is a lot more disciplines out there, a lot more variety, and probably seeing racers jumping across these disciplines. You're no longer just a road racer or just a triathlete. And you're really one of the people who's breaking trail on that, where you are a triathlete and a gravel racer, which is...
Nobody does that.
Nobody does that. So I'm interested in your take on this. Is it just because, hey, I enjoy this and it's challenging? Or do you feel it makes you a better racer? How do you balance all this?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the inspiration comes from, I, in the past couple of years, have just started doing a lot of my training more on gravel roads and recognizing just how much safer in terms of traffic wise. And I think for virtual racing, it's the same in virtual training. It's very much the same, the more that you're out there on the road, you realize it's can be a scary and dangerous place, and you get yourself away from cars more, and it's a lot more enjoyable. I mean, in terms of balancing race calendar, this year I did feel like I had to put triathlon a bit on the back burner. That all of the Lifetime Grand Prix was really taking over my season a bit. And, for better or worse, I'm like, I really love triathlon, but this gravel racing is really exciting and this is a cool opportunity. And so I've just thrown in these races. I knew I had St. George World Champs to fit in there. And that I thought was going to be my only triathlon. And so all of these other, the PTO Canadian Open and Boulder 70.3, feel like they've just sort of been thrown in. And my main focus has been in the more off-road and cycling portion of things. And so I think that, just training for long distance cycling and riding off-road is a lot more challenging on the body than just sitting in a TT position on the pavement, and you have to be a lot stronger, especially in mountain biking. There's a lot more stability and just muscular endurance in more dynamic ways that you have to have. And I think that translates pretty well into triathlon in terms of just maintaining for other sports. My run training has been what feels like next to nothing. It's been like maintenance minimally. And still I'm able to, pull off some pretty solid runs.
Let's take this kind of transition as an opportunity to really dig into the training and the racing side of the different disciplines. So one thing that I actually wanted to know was, having done both, having experience on both ends of that spectrum, how are these events actually similar to each other? They're both, 70.3 Ironman, and these gravel races are both very long events. Maybe we can sort of start there, but what other similarities are there that kind of help you as an athlete maybe be successful in both of them?
Yeah, I think definitely the duration that you are out there is very similar for each. So it feels like I am just preparing for these multi-hour races, and it just differs in what kind of sport and what kind of vehicle I'm on.
Yeah. So given that long duration is common between them, maybe things like fueling strategy might carry over really well between the two.
Yeah, that's where I feel like I have had a bit of an advantage over my off-road competitors. So a lot of these folks are coming from like road racing or mountain biking, where the races are a little bit shorter. And so as an iron distance triathlete, understanding like what it takes to race for 8, 9, up to 12 hours, like being aware of fueling and knowing how important that is has definitely been an advantage. I feel like I've had a bit of a one-up on my competitors in that sense. And as well, also pacing, understanding how to manage efforts, understanding, what the body is capable and what you really need to have into that like 8, 9 and over time period of being in a race.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up pacing, because that's something that I wanted to ask about. I think that we all assume, having never done a 70.3 triathlon, that it's a very steady pacing strategy. You kind of go out and swim your speed, you go out and you bike your speed, and you go out and you run your speed, and then you finish as fast as you can. That's my assumption anyway. I could be totally wrong. First off, is that what it's like in the 70.3? But then how does that compare to racing on the mountain bike or the gravel, where presumably you're working easier and harder, and it's a little bit more of a polarized sort of pacing strategy?
Yeah, in the bike racing, it is still really dynamic. You are still racing in packs. There's a strategy, it's important to try and stay with groups. And so the effort can be a lot of that over under that you see more in the road racing side of things, or mountain bike racing, shorter mountain bike racing side of things. And that is something that going into, I had an experience, for example, at Crusher, which was a race in Utah I did right before the PTO Canadian Open. And going into that race, I knew I just needed to it was basically 2 major climbs with a big descent in the middle. And I was like, I know I need to just go out and see how long I can stay with the front pack. And then, maybe I'll blow up in the end, maybe not, but let's just go and experiment and see. And that was the ability that I had to push really hard at the start and then still maintain that into the 4th and 5th hours gave me a lot of confidence going into these next races of to me, 70.3 racing is not, I'm coming from the Ironman distance for the past 5 years. I have gotten into this mindset of it is all about pacing. You got to maintain things. You can't overdo it at the beginning because you're going to regret it at the end, blah, blah, blah. But 70.3 racing, I am just remembering now from the earlier in my career that it's not actually like that. It is more about you really have to go for it. It's pushing harder than you really think that you can. And then just seeing how the cards lay and seeing how long you can maintain it. It's a much more challenging effort than iron distance racing and a lot more dynamic. And sometimes, you need to go and burn some matches at different points in the race. And it's a lot less of a risk, I think, in those shorter distance races. And so I took that experience from Crusher, knowing that I had just this really great experience of being able in these later hours to continue pushing into my triathlon racing, and recognizing that this is kind of the dynamic that you have to have going into these gravel and mountain bike races as well, is that it is about managing your effort, but at the same time, you need to know where it's okay to burn the matches and how much you've got left in the tank. I think I really surprised myself in some of these efforts in the past couple of races, just like re-tapping into just how much I know I can push myself in those later hours. And so it's given me a lot of confidence. And it means that I'm having fun with it, you know? I'm going in and I am just like seeing how hard I can push. And it's like, if I have these expectations of like, you know what, if I blow up at the end of the race, I blow up. And now I've learned a limit.
At least I tried.
Yeah,
I had fun doing it.
That's what I'm in sport for, is to like learn where my boundaries are, learn where my like physical and mental limits are. And if I can just keep pushing that and having fun with it, like that's what was for me at Boulder 70.3. I was having a blast. I saw some of my competitors and they didn't look like they were not having a good time at all. But I was like just so happy out there, even though I was like pushing it and suffering. You know, I was smiling. I was like cheering on my competitors and just having a really good time out there. And I think it makes such a huge difference.
Mateo has enjoyed the challenge of balancing triathlon and gravel. Let's hear his thoughts on how the disciplines fit together.
Mateo, Rach is competing across really, I don't want to say crazy, but a very wide range of events. How does the specific needs of 70.3, of gravel, of mountain bike work into their training program? And are you considering specific events in this, such as the course for Crusher, when they went and did that, and then also the course for Leadville? Or is it more of a general training for mountain bike, training for triathlon, training for gravel?
Yeah, so when Rach approached me about doing the Lifetime series for gravel and mountain bike, I'm not sure if Rach thought I would be on board. And Rach indicated to me that they felt that Lifetime was doing a commendable job of advocating for non-binary athletes and the category. And Rach really wanted to be a part of that inside of a sport where that representation was at the front. And I wanted to support Rach in that. And I know that Rach really enjoys gravel riding in particular and mountain biking as well. And I wanted to be able to make that happen for Rach if possible. I had my concerns. You know, there are two types of riders, those who have crashed and those who haven't crashed.
Those who will, yeah.
Yeah, those who haven't crashed yet. So that is a huge consideration and factor, whether you're on the road or off. But, you know, it's something that I really wanted to be careful about. And Rach and I have had discussions about how best to approach these gravel and mountain bike races in order to emerge from them as unscathed as possible. And that was my biggest concern going into them. For me, my intention was to use Rach's engine for gravel and mountain and not worry so much about becoming the best technical rider out there. And Rach already is a very accomplished technical rider. And so I didn't have any gross concerns about it. And I thought, yeah, this is a good way to mix it up. If Rach already enjoys riding their gravel bike and riding their mountain bike, why not create a structure where this athlete can really get the most out of their season? I saw mountain biking and gravel biking as a great supplement to the work they were doing for 70.3 and full distance racing. And that these long distance races like Crusher would be a fine addition to Rach's preparation for long course triathlon racing.
Is there anything in particular about these events that have benefits to the triathlon racing, such that, you know, like to take Crusher, for example, is there something about how the effort plays out that is just great training for triathlon? Or is it not, it's just otherwise a great event to do, but maybe a different event could have stood in just as well?
Yeah, Crusher is a great event. And there are a lot of things that apply well enough to racing 70.3 and long course triathlon. So much of Crusher is ridden on your own. And therefore, it is a sustained time trial type effort and a modulated effort. So much of it is out in the sun. And so you have to manage keeping your body cool and your hydration and your nutrition over time. The duration of the event is great preparation for a long Ironman event. And so all these things I thought fit well and would work into a plan that was still focused on Rach racing their best in the events that they've been racing as a professional athlete for so long, which are triathlon, long course triathlons.
It's interesting. We recently did a potluck episode with our special guest co-host, Grant Holicky, and he asked about the mental states that we like to compete in. And he was very clear and very adamant that happiness is the biggest thing for him. And I can see a lot of you two together in that it almost doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're happy and having fun. Your performance is just going to be so much better than if you're suffering or slogging or angry or any of these other emotional states.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that being positive is so powerful in that your suffering is going to feel less, because we're all suffering out there. It's all painful. Like, that's one of my mantras, is maintain the pain. I know if I'm not hurting out there, then I'm not going hard enough. Mm-hmm. And if I am going to be in there and be like, oh, this sucks and it's so painful and I'm like having a terrible time, like, oh, I don't like being in this, then I'm not going to perform as well as if I'm out there and enjoying myself. It helps us handle the stress and the pain that we are putting ourselves through.
So I really want to dive into the training here, because you talk to any triathlon coach, they'll tell you that training for triathlon alone is tough. You have to balance swimming, running, cycling. It means you're often training multiple times a day. You have to figure out recovery. It's tough, particularly if you're training for Ironman. So you've thrown another element of gravel racing in there. I have to believe that at some point something has to give. So how do you balance all that? Or I guess the interesting question here is, how would you feel your training is different from somebody who just trains for triathlon?
It has been a very interesting experience. I feel like I am training for like 5 different sports, because I've got swim, TT bike, run, but then I've got gravel bike and mountain bike, because even like gravel and mountain are very different. Mm-hmm. And I've been joking that I just feel half trained in everything. I feel like I'm dabbling in everything because I don't have such a strong focus that I'm used to in the world of triathlon. And I will admit, I do a lot of training on the TT bike, on the trainer. So just like focused efforts. And I think that really gives me that, just like the base and being able to do the intensity without having to worry about, traffic and terrain and all of that jazz. Like, it really feels like I can just sit and focus on the efforts, maintaining certain heart rates, just really going at it. No matter if I'm in the TT position, but I think it's easy to translate into other bike positions as well. Where it's challenging is leading up to, for example, Unbound, where I needed to spend 12 hours on my gravel bike. I had the Ironman World Champs 2 weeks before that, or 3 weeks, 3 weeks, I think, before that. And so the majority of my training was on the TT bike, because that was the focus. And then all of a sudden you've got to switch, and it's like a little bit of recovery, and then like do a couple of big rides on the gravel bike and just hope that it's going to translate. The same thing with mountain biking. Even before, like, I have never spent longer than 3 hours on a mountain bike. And next weekend I need to race 8 or 9 hours on it. Hopefully. That's going to be...
I was going to be maybe 7 for you based on the rate you're going now.
So it sounds like, based on what you just said, and you talked earlier about the Boulder 70.3, that you hadn't done a ton of run training and you just had to kind of hope that the running fitness was there. It sounds like that's part of the approach that you have to take here. You're jumping between these sports that you just have to hope you've got a general base of fitness, and it's just going to carry over. And when you get on that gravel bike or on that mountain bike and have to do 8-9 hours, that you can handle that bike, even though you've just done a ton of training on the TT, or that fitness is going to carry over to running if you haven't had a lot of time to do run training. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, I still maintain like a pretty strong swim program. So I've got that as like an aerobic base as well. And the running, a lot of my runs are like off the bike. And so it just kind of extends that endurance training into longer workouts. And so I do feel like I have kind of, in a way, been racing into shape. With bike racing, as opposed to triathlon, long distance triathlon, you can race a lot more You see so many gravel and road and mountain bike cyclists like they're racing every weekend. I mean, that's what I feel like I'm doing now. But I feel like I'm racing into shape in a lot of ways. And so it's less of the pounding on your body. And so you can just do a little bit more. Those race experiences, obviously you're building fitness and experience. And so, yeah, it feels like I've just kind of had to cross my fingers and hope that everything's translating and surprise myself. Like the run that I had at the PTO Canadian Open blew my mind. I had no idea that I would be able to maintain that pace for 18K with such little run training that I have. And so it has to be like everything else has to be translating.
Hey coaches, we have a new guide for you at fasttalklabs.com called How to Grow Your Coaching Business. In this free downloadable playbook, Coach Philip Hatsis explores how coaches like you can grow profits, create opportunities, and reach your growth goals, no matter how big or small. Visit fasttalklabs.com now to get this free download.
Part of Rach's success has been a result of their trust in their coach. Let's hear Mateo's description of how they've trained Rach so successfully.
Let's dive into that program a little bit more because Rach mentioned that in quote unquote Mateo's program, every workout has a plan. And given the diversity of their competitions, there's got to be some pretty intelligent training design going on here. So can you tell us how you're using each discipline from swim, bike, run, strength, mountain bike, gravel to train effectively and also efficiently? Overall, how are you building their aerobic base? How are you figuring in high intensity with all of these different variables?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. There is a lot going on, but the truth is it's not rocket science. The body responds to certain training stimuli, period. You need aerobic conditioning, you need high intensity bouts, you need sustained muscular endurance. And when it comes to certain disciplines like swim or gravel or mountain in particular, skills and technique really come in. So for me, going back to something I mentioned earlier, for Rach, it's all about consistency, number one, and focus and deliberate planning. And when I'm building a plan for Rach, looking to race gravel, mountain, long distance or middle distance triathlon, it has to be focused and deliberate, and it really has to be consistent. And I'd be happy to talk about how I'm building the swim, the bike, and the run to enable Rach to perform at a high level across these different disciplines.
Yeah, I'm interested in, is the long aerobic stuff only coming on the bike, or are you doing that only on the run? Do you have this sort of standard structure that you're following, or is it kind of just like normal training and it happens to be on a gravel bike one day and a tri bike the other day?
Yeah, it looks a lot like that. I'll start with swim, actually. On the swim, Rach gets a lot of their intensity, strength, and volume. We get to do, a pretty high load overall in the water because it doesn't bang an athlete up like running, for example. So we spend a lot of time in the water. The better an athlete is in the water, the better they'll be set up to ride hard and fast, which will then set them up to run well. So, in the water, Rach and I have worked on technique. I remember the first time I was on deck with Rach when we got started together, we were at Ironman Chattanooga, and I was just there with Rach, kind of seeing how we might work together as coach and athlete. It was unofficial at that point. And I gave Rach some direction with their kick in the swim, and it made an immediate change. And then, we've been working on other technical elements like their finish or the recovery and even their cadence on the swim. And these have all made a difference in the swim. But on the bike, as you've seen, Rach is doing a whole range of different types of disciplines in their racing this summer. So I'm using the time trial bike for a lot of strength and intensity. And we're doing a lot of that work on the trainer. So we're doing really focused, hard workouts on the trainer. I call them high intensity intervals, where we'll do bouts that look like VO2 max kind of bouts. Best repeatable effort is what I say. I prescribe workouts on perceived level of exertion for the most part and cadence. And then off the back of those sessions, we're doing some sustained muscular endurance work. And then we'll do rounds of that inside of a very hard bike session on the trainer. And that's on the TT bike. And then I'll do volume and recovery on the gravel bike and some strength work on the gravel bike also. So just go out and ride and they can get volume that way. And sometimes I'm actually mixing it up. I might have them do a very high intensity trainer session on the TT bike in the morning and then moderate to long ride on the gravel bike in the afternoon. And likewise, the mountain bike, we can do volume on the mountain bike depending on as we're getting ready for Leadville, it's been more volume on the mountain bike, but we're also really focusing on skills on the mountain bike. And I'm always having Rach ride below their skill level on the mountain bike, because right now, the most important thing is for Rach to get off of each session unscathed, to stay on the bike for this training session and to stay on the bike for the racing session. The worst thing that we could do right now is get injured on the mountain or the gravel or the road bike for that matter, which is why I really am a huge fan of smashing on the trainer. It's safe, it's focused, and it's very high quality.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I think it's really insightful that you're using the TT bike is ultimately getting the lowest amount of volume, but what it sounds like maybe the highest intensity. And I think that might be really good to maintain the fitness and the adaptations that the body makes to that position, right? Because it's a very different position compared to the gravel or the road bike. And, we can kind of get into the weeds on the length tension relationship of muscles, but, the high level is ultimately that I think it's smart that you're doing that low volume, high intensity stuff on the TT bike. And I bet you that really preserves some of the specific attributes that Rach needs to be successful on it.
Yeah, that's really astute, Rob. That's exactly right. I'm really intentional about using the different bikes to train Rach in those different body positions. I want Rach to have exposure to each different setup, geometry, and body position. Under load, we may talk about this later, but the different races have different demands.
Yep.
And I want to be very race specific when we're on different bike setups. But yes, being in the TT position is key and critical, and being upright and even more upright on the gravel and then the mountain bike are also really important.
So that was really what I wanted to get at and ask your opinion on this, because you're kind of you've created your own experiment and then one experiment here, but there's that whole question of crossover. How specific do you need to be? Like if you don't do a ton of run training, does your running suffer? Or is it a case that if you just build that general aerobic fitness, it's going to translate into your swimming, it's going to translate into your running, it's going to translate into your cycling? What have you found? Because obviously you can't train all 5 of these. Do you just find you have a good aerobic base and hey, even if you can't run for a bit, you're going to run well when it comes to that race?
Yeah, that's what it kind of seems like is happening. I put a lot of trust into my coach, Mateo, to really balance things. And it does feel like, even if I am training for triathlon or mountain bike, I'm still I'll have one ride on the gravel bike, or, even if I have a certain focus, I'll still have 1 or 2 rides a week on a different bike, just to keep my mind and body in that position and riding those kinds of bikes and just, switching it up a bit. Like you say, it is an experiment. It's totally an experiment, and it seems to be working really well for me.
Rach, something that you had mentioned before was that the pounding on your body is less. And so you're able to, I think you said, do a little bit more. Have you noticed any, and maybe this is a question for Mateo, we can ask him too, has there been a change in the overall training volume, in your training intensity? I know there's big differences in the maybe the bike, the modality that you're choosing, but are you doing more hours now than you've ever done with including the bike?
No, I don't think that my volume has increased very much. I mean, Mateo and I started working together in, I think, September or October last year. And the training that I am doing with him does feel like every workout has a plan. Like there is less sort of like just general recovery stuff and more like intensity on back-to-back days, especially on the bike. And I feel like that has been really key in getting my bike back up to where it is right now. And I do believe that things like, I spend quite a few days in the pool. I'm swimming probably at least 4 or 5 days a week, but often 6 days a week. And I feel like swimming really, as my former swim coach, Jerry Rodriguez, likes to say, running loves swimming. So swimming can be really beneficial to run training. Even if you're not doing a lot of run training, swimming can be a big boost to that.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that. So why do they say that?
You'll have to ask Jerry for the details on that. It seems to translate really well, I think, because it just it keeps the body loose. You're still working on that aerobic capacity. Swimming is more of like a full body workout. You're working on tautness in the body. So there's a lot of core strength that you need that I think helps with maintaining that in a run sense as well.
So where do you feel you're doing most of your aerobic work? Is it really split between swimming, running, and cycling? Or do you find that there's one that you're particularly focusing on to build that big aerobic engine?
It is definitely mostly on the bike. Okay. I would say that the majority of my training is focusing on the bike, but it's also not like I am doing any massively long rides. I think that my big ride days are my race days. So leading up to Unbound, I had one 6-hour ride and one 5-hour ride in the couple of weeks leading up to it. So it's not like I'm doing big epic days. Yeah, it feels like, as I said, I think my racing is like the long ride days, and then otherwise it's very focused interval work.
So that I find very interesting. How many interval sessions do you think you're doing in a week between all the different disciplines?
Well, let's see. I would say I have maybe 3 interval sessions on the bike, and then my swim workouts seem to be all hard.
Okay.
There's never an easy day.
So it goes, yeah.
Yeah. Never an easy swim day. And then my running is, I feel like it's just been not recovery runs, but just like steady runs with some pickups. Or I think I maybe recall like 3 or 4 runs in the past couple of months that have actually had intervals in them. Mm-hmm. So that feels like it is bare minimum.
That's really interesting, because at least the way I was taught to train triathlon was a little bit different, which is, yes, most of the aerobic work's done on the bike because bike is so less damaging on your body. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do long endurance type work, you get on the bike and just do that. You might do some interval work on the bike. Running, I was always taught you do interval work running because you need to build that efficiency. You need to build that ability to go at speed. And then if there's anywhere that you're going to go easy, it's in the pool, because that aerobic training you do in running and cycling is going to translate to swimming. And really what you need to do most in the pool is work on the neuromuscular side, the form, your strokes. So you're doing something very different from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we don't want to put this episode out because we're exposing Mateo's secret to the world right now. Sorry, Mateo.
We're doing that. Gonna have a bunch of people killing you. Go, thanks for doing that episode. But
I know.
I'm interested. Is that just your coach's style, or does that have to do with the mix of the disciplines?
Well, I think there's a bit of a mix there. So I feel like I respond quite well to a high swim volume. Okay. I learned that when I started with Tower 26 several years ago in Jerry's program. And Mateo is also a very swim heavy coach, I would say, especially in terms of frequency. And for me, I have been injured running so much in my career that I have had to maintain a low volume. I have had to learn how to run a fast marathon on like a 90-minute long run. And so that is just like, for me, how my body responds the best, or what I'm able to do. Like, I am not able to do a lot of intensity or volume running because I'm so susceptible to injury.
No, that's fair. And I'll actually say we had Melanie McQuaid on the show, and she said something similar and said a lot of triathletes underestimate the swim. Mm-hmm. And definitely see what you're talking about, which is, the issue with running is it's so damaging on your joints.
So damaging, so damaging.
And I see a lot of triathletes, especially when they're getting into it, will try to balance cycling and running and end up injuring themselves too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is what I've learned over my now 11, 12-year career is that in order to run fast off the bike, I don't necessarily need to have all of that intensity and volume. I think that especially because I have been a full-time athlete for so long, I have already a lot of underlying fitness from that decade of training full-time. And I see inspiration in other athletes. You look at like Jesse Thomas, for example, was an incredible runner. And yes, have had a history of, being a collegiate runner, but his run volume during his triathlon career was quite minimal as well. And he still had some incredible runs.
Running, because of how damaging it can be, has been a challenge for Rach. Let's hear how Mateo has fit running into the training routine.
At different times, different athletes will require different training structures. And Rach has been dealing with some injuries for the past, since the winter. Rach came off the mountain bike and bruised a bone in their knee, and that required a lot of downtime, actually. And what I have done is used the bike to build fitness for the run. So we're getting aerobic fitness, we're getting muscular fitness, we're just not getting sport-specific run fitness. But, the stronger you can be on the bike, the less it will break you down and the more you'll have in the tank still when you get off to run. And so what I've been doing with the run is doing a lot of run off the bike work so that it is sport-specific and that it kind of tricks the body into feeling like it's a higher load. If you do an hour run off of a 2 or 3 hour bike, that increases the impact of the quality of that run in terms of volume and fatigue, pre-fatigue before going into the run, and race specificity. And so we'll do an hour, 75 minutes, 90 minutes off the bike regularly. And we'll also do those at race intensities. So Rach will do lower intensity runs for recovery or endurance, which our endurance runs are not that long. We'll do a little bit of economy work with some short pickups on shorter run days. And we'll do a lot of what I call muscular endurance and race specific intensity work off the bike. And that limits the amount of pounding and damage on the body and maximizes the training effect of the running that we are doing.
It's almost as if you're applying the same principles with using the TT bike for high intensity on the trainer to the run situation, right? What exactly does this buy us? How do we maximize the contribution that the run can make? And it sounds like in your program, tying that to coming off the bike is how you get that efficiency out of training, as opposed to doing it as a totally separate session where you're missing the adaptation or the stress on the body that Rach needs to face in their race. It really emphasizes, again, the efficiency I think you have built into your program.
It really sounds like you're saying it's not so much that there's the secret sauce magic formula for training. There's a secret sauce and magic formula for you that you figured out that's very individual for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if this would work for any other person, but this is just, I am hoping I am becoming a smarter athlete as I get through my career. Sometimes I don't do very smart things. I have done some very stupid things this year already to hurt myself. But yeah, I hope that I am I learn from my experience, and I think it really has taken me this long to sort of figure things out. And the fact that I have been for so long now, there's several years that I haven't had a running injury due to too much running. I haven't had any broken bones in my feet anymore. My feet used to be my nemesis, and now I'm really through all of the work that I've been doing, I have also in the past several years been working with a specific strength and mobility coach and like a natural movement coach that I think has been a huge game changer specifically for my running, just in terms of understanding like what happens to my body under fatigue and how to like just proper neuromuscular firing has really been huge for injury prevention for me.
All right. So I promise I'm done with drilling you with questions. I just want to impress on everybody, Ironman, triathlon is such a hard sport to do. So I'm talking as a coach right now. To balance the disciplines that you're balancing, to be as successful as you've been and for as many years as you have. I just really want to impress on everybody how difficult that is to do, how difficult all that is to balance. We said you kind of have your secret sauce. It has to be a pretty magical secret sauce to have been able to pull off what you've pulled off.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like I love saying yes to new adventure. And I think that for me, like I said, I just have this attitude of going out there and giving it my all and seeing how I can challenge myself. And I put a lot of trust into my coaches. I'm pretty terrible at like taking care of myself in a lot of ways and paying attention to like what I need to be doing, blah, blah, blah. I put a lot of faith into the folks around me and my team around me to take care of me and to give me the training that is going to work the best for me.
Rach, a little while ago, you mentioned your knees and that you've been crashing your mountain bike on them, which I think begs the question, because this is potentially a hurdle for a lot of people looking to make the transition.
Yeah.
How do skills, how does equipment, how does that play into the transition from going from a on-road 70.3 focus into the gravel and the mountain bike world?
Yeah, I think, well, especially for mountain biking, it's huge. Like being able to understand your equipment and your setup can be night and day. Yep. You know, getting into gravel, I think, is a little bit easier. And it is like a very welcoming community. So, but in mountain biking, you know, I just got my bikes at the beginning of the year and I'm still like a little bit lost as to how they work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I am the type of rider who takes risks and, you know, loves to go fast and may not see hairpins or obstacles in the way. Yeah. You know, I ride on the North Shore in Vancouver at some of the best and hardest technical mountain biking. Yes. And so that was my intro to trail riding. And I think I learned very quickly that I'm pretty good at just like holding on and going down things and surviving. Going up and over things is where I tend to have the most difficulty. And, you know, even on the first day of the stage race last weekend, my bike was completely set up improperly. I had my tires way overinflated. I accidentally locked out my front fork. And on the first somewhat technical descent, went down and crashed. And I had just healed myself from a crash on a descent from Crusher. I had, you know, road rash on my elbow and my knee on one side. And then at the stage race, I crashed on the other side.
Oh, you're balanced. Perfect. It's actually a feature.
And really, like, I did something to my knee that was very painful. Running in the week leading up to Boulder 70.3, I would start out at about a 7 out of 10 pain level when I would run. And so it was a big question mark as to, I had to get an x-ray to make sure it was not broken and I wasn't running on broken bones, because I seem to also be really good at doing that. And I don't want to continue doing that. And so knowing that like the pain I was experiencing was like, oh, okay, I can just run through this and I'm not going to be injuring myself any further. Thankfully in the race, it was no problem. But, you know, that first day of that stage race was a huge eye opener of like, if I had just had my tire pressure right and had understood or been paying more attention to my suspension on the mountain bike, it would have been night and day. And then going into the second and third days with the correct setup and having like way different experience and it being way safer and having much more traction. That has been a huge learning curve for me. And it honestly has been quite overwhelming to figure out the mountain bike side of things because it is such a different sport, the technical side of things, and just understanding how all of these things on the bike work.
There's a lot of
so
knobs, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of knobs
lot of
and
things to
dials
pump
and
up.
pressures and things to pump up. And so I learned the hard way that asking for help is really important.
Yep.
And I have also taken some skills courses. So I have had the opportunity to go and hang out in Moab for a couple of days and took a lesson there. And so understanding more the technique of particularly mountain biking has been incredibly helpful. With the gravel riding, I felt like it really to me, it just, because it's a lower technical style of riding, it's a lot easier to get into. It's really just about, getting a good bike set up and getting tires that are appropriate for the terrain that you're riding, and just going out and getting used to riding on terrain that is not as stable as pavement.
Yeah.
I think it's more just about the feel, because you're really not, a lot of the gravel riding that folks are doing are just on, pretty well-maintained gravel roads.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's a good place to start. And then you can graduate into more technical things, bigger rocks, single track, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I almost kind of liken it to the swim side of the triathlon, where technique is so important. And you can go into the swim. So I'm saying this because I think the triathletes will understand the comparison. You can go into that swim and just work so incredibly hard. But if your technique is off, you don't go anywhere.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And mountain biking, and to some extent gravel, can be like that as well. If you don't have the mountain bike technique, then you're slowing down too much for corners, which means you're sprinting to get back up to speed. You're burning that energy and burning those matches. But I'm really happy and excited to hear that you have taken lessons. And I think that is a big takeaway for people. There are so many mountain bike skills coaches, and they're not all focused on downhill and huge jumps and everything that's exciting that you think they're focused on. There's a lot of coaches that are really specialized in taking people like yourself who are looking to make the change into mountain biking and teaching proper technique that increases safety and increases speed. And frankly, going fast is a heck of a lot more fun than going slow. So,
well, it increases enjoyment as well. It's like if you're out there on the trails and you're just scared, just scared.
Nobody wants that.
It's not fun. It's really not fun.
Rach, as I think you pointed out, the transition from triathlon into gravel is maybe the easy first half step to make because of the similarities that are there. And for anyone who are looking to expand their racing disciplines, maybe the full jump to mountain biking is a step, a leap, and a jump. Do you see kind of gravel being the good first move?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think because the bike position is very similar, the technicality of it is a lot lower. The equipment that you're on is so much similar that it's very easy. I mean, I started on a road bike. I started riding gravel on a road bike. And that is, sometimes now I go back to those gravel roads and I'm like, what was I thinking? That must have been so terrible and uncomfortable. This is way better on a gravel bike. But, that's why I tell a lot of folks who are interested in gravel is just put some bigger tires on your road bike and go and try it out. Go on a trail. And you don't need to necessarily go all in on, thousands of dollars on a new bike when you can just experiment a little bit and see if you like it, see if it's something that's interesting. And there is, I think, such a welcoming community. The racing is just so inclusive and a really cool environment. There's often a free meal and a free beer at the end, which I always love. That's definitely been a perk of gravel racing. And I think jumping into mountain biking, even to me as an experienced gravel racer, jumping into mountain biking this year, I felt like I was way in over my head, and it was just trying to figure out how to ride these trails and crashing all the time and hurting myself. And although I love it, it's something that I really think about in terms of my long-term health. Do I want to be doing, you hear these horror stories of people, having really bad crashes on mountain bikes. And it really, I think, is food for thought in terms of getting into off-road racing and off-road riding and being at first comfortable in more varied and loose terrain before getting into mountain biking can be really beneficial.
Transitioning from triathlon into gravel, is there one particular technique that you've used or skill that you've practiced that has really increased your comfort and your fun on the gravel bike? Has there been something that you've done that's maybe unlocked sort of the secret on gravel for you?
That's a good question.
That's a good question means I have no answer because it was a terrible question is really what that's a good question means.
I think it's more so like translating mountain bike skills. So like understanding more about just my best friend Jill calls it like being big on the bike. So like, your elbows out and your knees out and just having a bigger presence on the bike and more to absorb the shock. I think that it feels like a more stable position on the bike. Yeah. It's very counterintuitive to what triathletes are used to. We're used to being just like small, very small and confined. And so it's a different way of being on a bike is being big. I think the other thing too for gravel is some of the details, like your tire choice, your tire size, your tire pressure can make like night and day in terms of how comfortable you are on the bike and how stable it feels.
And that's definitely an area that people can experiment with.
Yes.
Go out and ride the same gravel road at 20 PSI, 30 PSI, 40 PSI, see how it feels differently for each.
Yeah.
Go around some corners, feel how stable it feels. That's something that you can do in your own neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And riding with others who are maybe more experienced, following them on the trails, like having that, someone to emulate, I think can be really powerful as well.
Certainly.
Before we close out the episode, let's hear Mateo talk about one last important piece of Rach's training, race recon.
So course recon is a huge part of our success. So I had a training camp leading into the Ironman World Championships in St. George in May. I was in St. George for 5 or 6 weeks before the race with a small squad of athletes, and Rach was a part of that. And we reconned that course, every inch of that course. We swam in the reservoir when it was still freezing and got very clear as to what that water temperature would be like and the impact that it would have. And I toughened those athletes to it. We stayed in even when it was cold. They stayed in. I was on deck with my binoculars, or on the shore with my binoculars, and actually a walkie-talkie. I had 2 ways, walkie-talkies in my athletes' little float torpedoes, and I could communicate to them while they were swimming. And we immediately became clear that we were going to need to use neoprene beanies to maintain body temperature in those conditions. Thankfully, in the days before the race, the water temperature went up a bit, but my athletes were really toughened to some very cold water. We rode every inch of the bike course. We got a very clear sense of the course profile in the early part of the race, the mid part of the race, the latter part of the race. I exposed the athletes to the heat and the wind and the UV exposure. So we got really clear about what the right gearing choices would be. I had athletes switch their rear cassettes for this race. I had athletes switch their front wheel choices to a slightly shallower front wheel. Rach went with a deeper set, but some of my age group athletes went with slightly shallower wheels in the front to better handle in the crosswinds and be able to stay down, put power down, and ride confidently. And, we saw where we could make gains on this course. One of my age group athletes had just one of the fastest sections on the long descent in that because of the big gearing that we were using on that course. And then likewise on the run, we ran that run course at speed. We ran that run course for just endurance runs and really got it dialed as to how to best sustain a high performance racing effort on the day when we knew it was going to be hot and sunny exposed and just unforgiving.
So I think that we're getting toward the end of the episode here. And as always, we like to make sure that things are actionable for people. And so we oftentimes like to end with the take home, which is sort of a 1 minute, if you want, to to share the high-level summary, the take-home information pieces, throughout the episode that you think are the most important things for listeners to hear.
You know what I just noticed?
What?
We've lost our 5-minute timer.
Huh?
We finished with 1 minute take-homes.
Yeah.
So, of course, we've got a 5-minute timer.
5 minutes.
Which serves us no good whatsoever, but I still like to flip it every once in a while.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, would you like to go first? You have 1 minute to kind of give us what you feel is the most salient point from the episode or what you hope the listeners really take from this.
Well, to me, I think that how I have been so successful in this is that I just say yes to a lot of things and experiment and go out and have fun and follow, what feels good and fun for me. I think that, understanding that if you are used to riding a TT bike for hours at a time, you can hop on a gravel bike and go ride for hours too. It's going to be the same type of fitness. It translates into that. And it's a great way to kind of switch things up as well if someone is, maybe a bit bored of being on the TT bike and just wants to experience something different. I think riding gravel is a way that might be inspiring for a lot of people to continue in sport, to try something new. And that, really your triathlon training is going to translate into that endurance training for gravel. Again, mountain biking, getting some skills training can be huge. Understanding that it can be scary and daunting for the off-road racing and more riding, just because that surface is unstable. And so just going into it knowing that, understanding that you're going to have some feelings around it and that it might be scary to start off with.
Yeah. Rach, I think I'm really similar to you in my take home. And that is, if you want to do something, you can do it. There's nothing that says you have to engage with sport or gender in a preconceived traditional notion, and that everybody has any opportunity that they want to pursue. And so if you want to change from being an on-road racer to an off-road racer, then great, go for it.
Yeah.
We talked about how difficult that is, but in some regard, that's because we talked about doing it at the highest level. And that isn't everybody listening to the show. So you don't have to be afraid, but you might need to get some help. And a coach is helpful. A skills coach is helpful. Maybe somebody who knows about equipment that you don't know about is very helpful. So it's great to talk with people, but more than anything, the best is to just go after whatever your heart desires, right? And take those steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trevor.
So I guess it's probably pretty obvious where I'm going to go with my take home based on my questioning. I'm just fascinated by the balance you've had. Because if an athlete came to me and said, I want to do Ironman and I want to do gravel racing and I want to do mountain biking, probably my response would be, I think we need to do an intervention here. But you've managed to do it, and you've managed to do it very successfully. And what I heard from you is two things that I think have allowed you to be successful. One is really learning what works for you. And it sounds like you and your coach have done a really good job over the years of just figuring out, here's what you shouldn't be doing, here's what you should be doing, and that's how you can balance everything. The other thing that I heard that I kind of liked hearing, because it's a little different from what's popular right now, because right now everything's specificity, specificity, specificity. But you can't train all 5 disciplines to the level that you want. And it sounds like you've really done a good job of building a general engine and then trusting that it's going to translate when you get to the particular event. And so far, it sounds like that's really worked for you.
Yeah, sure has.
You say intervention, I say celebration.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I mean, that's kind of my point is if somebody had come to me and said, let's do this.
Let's do this.
I admit, I kind of would have said, I'm not sure that's possible, but you've shown it is possible. And I'm really, that's why I've been so fascinated by this. I mean, and that's something that should be celebrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I really credit Mateo for saying yes to a lot of this stuff. He's like, okay, we're doing Lifetime Grand Prix. We're doing Ironman World Championships, and I guess we're throwing in some triathlon in there. And just, even the fact of being like, oh, hey, I've got a free weekend. can I jump into Boulder 70.3? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And he'd be like, yeah, it's in your backyard. You may as well jump in and go for it.
The burning question that remains, do you have TT bars on your gravel bike?
Don't
Not-
answer that. Don't answer that.
This is going to split our audience. Just so, do you have TT bars on your gravel
Oh,
bike?
I
Come
know.
on.
It's such a controversial topic. I do not. And at Unbound, I really wished I did.
Fair enough.
That was another episode of Fast Talk. Subscribe to Fast Talk wherever you prefer to find your favorite podcasts. Be sure to leave us a rating and a review. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Talk are those of the individual. As always, we love your feedback. Join the conversation at forums.fasttalklabs.com or tweet me at @RobertPickles. You can also head to fasttalklabs.com to get access to our endurance sports knowledge base, coach continuing education, as well as our in-person and remote athlete services. For Rach McBride, Mateo Mercur, and Trevor Connor, I'm Rob Pickles. Thanks for listening.